I'm Barbara Levin, your host, and this is PhotoTalk. Sponsored by Professional Women Photographers, better known as PWP, PhotoTalk was created specifically to explore the roles, the history, perspectives, and accomplishments of women in today's world of photography. I am delighted to introduce our guest, pet photographer and pet whisperer, Terry Berenson. Welcome, Terry.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. After a successful marketing career, Terry Berenson decided to combine her two passions, photography and animals, and launch her second career. Today, she's one of New York's premier animal portraitists, specializing in dogs and cats, and her images of exotic animals hang in several private collections. When not shooting pet portrait commissions, Terry loves to take her camera on the road and has recently shot in Egypt, Cuba, and Australia. She studied with some of today's best photographers, both privately and at the International Center for Photography in New York City. Terry also serves on the board of directors of Professional Women Photographers as the organization's development director, raising funds for PWP's educational, networking, and community outreach programs. In addition, Terry has volunteered at the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, the ASPCA, to photograph newly arrived dogs and cats for their adoption website. So, Terry, at some point you had an epiphany and decided to spend the rest of your life photographing animals, but you also had a career in marketing and advertising. So how did you get into the field of pet photography, and why did you choose to volunteer at the ASPCA?
Well, I was always interested in photography. I've been the family and friend photographer for, since I was a teenager. And after I retired, I was using the camera a little bit more and studying. And a friend had this wonderful dog who was part of an organization called READ, which is Reading Education Assistance Dogs. Mm-hmm. And someone was actually writing a book about this dog it's a series of books called One Incredible Dog. And this dog
what was his name?
Kizzy.
Kizzy.
Okay. And Kizzy, who still does this therapy work, they were writing a book about him. And the author...
Well, tell me, what does it mean, the therapy work?
Well, therapy dogs are registered to help in a variety of ways, whether it's visiting a hospital or a nursing home, or in this case, he would work with children in schools. Kids who had stuttering problems or difficulty reading, who were very self-conscious reading in front of adults, they learned that these dogs could be trained to sit there and listen and be read to and actively engage in listening. And these kids were able to overcome their anxiety about reading by reading out loud to dogs.
So you then photographed Kizzy?
So I was asked to photograph Kizzy for the back cover of his book, and I spent 2 days with him. This is a photo of him.
He's so adorable.
Yeah, this is a photo. I spent 1 day at his home, and then another day at the library. And I came home that night and I said to my husband, I had the best 2 days of my life. This is what I want to do with the rest of my life. I want to photograph dogs and cats and any other animal who would be willing to let me photograph them. And that was basically the beginning, and that was about 5 or 6 years ago that I've been doing this professionally.
So did that inspire you then to volunteer at the ASPCA?
Yes. I actually had been looking. I wanted to increase my practice, and and what better way than at an animal shelter where they're constantly getting new animals, and so I volunteered at the ASPCA, which is pretty near where I live, and I started taking photographs. And I was lucky because I had recently completed learning some Photoshop techniques at the time, and a lot of these dogs are you know, they arrive, they're really a mess. I mean, no one.
Well, that's
not,
like the photograph of messy dog.
right. This is I call this messy dog, and this is just typical of what a newly arrived puppy might look like. And
but you make such a connection with the dog that he seems to be so adorable, even though he's all messed up.
well, the key really is the eyes. You
Yes,
really have to
okay.
just zone in and focus in on their eyes, and
so
that's
you
where
make a real
that's where
connection
their
with
souls
them.
are, and that's
Yes.
really what I fell in love with in doing it, was really feeling like these dogs, these cats, these birds, whatever. Well, birds are a little more difficult, but these dogs, I'm really developing a rapport with them.
And did your photographs help in their adoption?
Yes, absolutely. They
did,
praised
so-
my photographs because most of the volunteers before me were not really professional photographers. Not that I was a professional at that point, but I had certainly studied and really taken a lot of photographs. So the previous photographs, that most of them were really more snapshots. And certainly people weren't going home and photoshopping out leashes or ugly things in the background. And so I tried to make the pictures more like a portrait.
Oh, they are,
and that
absolutely.
really
and we have
worked.
this one of the ASPCA cat.
Right. Her name was Church. This cat's name was Church. And again, this was taken in a very large cat habitat. So there was lots of stuff going on. And by cropping and making the background blurry, I was able to really make a real portrait out of it.
Absolutely, there's no question about that.
No.
So through these pictures, you then decided to set up a pet photography business?
Yes,
And you were retired at this point?
I was retired from my job in marketing and advertising after a very long career. And so the first thing I did was I set up a website, and the majority of the images on the site were either from the ASPCA or Kizzy or my own animals or friends' animals who I had volunteered to photograph. And in 2010, I was contacted by a company, a chemical, pharmaceutical testing company, who had a black lab as their mascot. And they had been doing a calendar every year featuring this lab. And again, they had used pretty much local photographers in Kansas City where they were located. And they decided to go big time and hire, you know, a New York photographer. I say that in quotes. And so they hired me, and I was lucky enough to work with some really nice people, and we did the 2010 calendar, and I think there's a shot of the
Thanksgiving and Christmas.
Thanksgiving,
Right, so let's talk about the Thanksgiving photo.
The Thanksgiving photo.
Because we see here like 7 dogs sitting around a Thanksgiving table with a beautiful turkey. Now, how in the world did you do that?
Well, I really have to start off by giving credit to my wonderful teacher, Lester Lefkowitz, who is on the faculty at ICP. And not only did Lester teach me a lot about digital photography, but he also really taught me a lot about Photoshop. And this particular photo is actually 9 photographs, put together into a montage. Obviously, you cannot take a photo of
9 dogs,
6 dogs, 7 dogs sitting around a table with a real turkey and expect them to sit still. So first we shot the table, beautifully set, and then each dog was photographed. All the turkey and anything real food was taken off the table at that time. And we put some cheese on the plate in front of them so they'd be engaged, and took each dog separately. And actually 2 of those dogs are the same dog. And I just changed the color of their fur. And
a lot of fancy
Photoshop stuff. And then we needed a background, so that was, at the time, that was my dining room window in my apartment. And it all came together beautifully, though. I really have to say, I was really pleased.
It's a magnificent photo, and I guess you did something similar for Christmas as well, with a fireplace.
Although
and
this was really, we were lucky enough to be able to photograph in a family, a a couple who actually breed the Labrador Retrievers. And so we went to their home and set up the Christmas tree and lit the fire, and this was one of their dogs. And so this was, I mean, the only thing that was done here was you have to expose for the fire, so you take one shot at one exposure so the fire isn't blown out, and then you photograph the dog and the Christmas tree lights, and then you put those together. But that's simple compared to the Thanksgiving photo.
Compared to Thanksgiving. So what type of equipment do you use?
Well, in my normal everyday practice, I use a Nikon digital SLR camera and Nikon speed lights. For this, Lester was kind enough to pitch in more of his professional studio equipment, because this required a lot of sensitive lighting. So I was very lucky that he helped me along with it.
So how else do you market your business?
Well, I do a lot of social media. I'm on Facebook with a business page, and I have a blog that's on my website where I really talk about, I give tips for people on how to take better animal photographs.
That's a really good idea.
Yeah.
So you probably get a lot of referrals also.
Yes, I do. And
Word of
repeat
mouth.
business, actually. I'm lucky
Really?
enough, I had photographed a dog last year. A woman had 3 dogs, and one of them was elderly, and she wanted me to photograph that dog, so I photographed her. And now, next month, I'm going to be photographing another one of her dogs, and that's always wonderful when you get somebody who wants you, who wants you back. So, yes,
That's a
it's great.
sign of good photography.
And I also, I published a book, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and I leave it in veterinaries,
In the waiting rooms.
in their waiting
Sure.
rooms for people to
Sure.
look at, in grooming, dog grooming salons, and sometimes when I'm just in the park with my dog, and you know, it's a captive audience, and we get to talking with different owners, and or if I see a really remarkably beautiful dog, I'd say I'd love to
photograph
your
that.
dog, and I give them my business card. And
So talking about that, why don't we talk about the Afghan?
oh
Because
yes,
that's a great story.
Joe the Afghan.
Joe the Afghan
So
is
this
a
was-
beautiful dog.
This was a dog that I actually met on the street with his owner. I have never taken a picture of an Afghan and always wanted to, because to me they are among the most beautiful dogs. And I was walking down Madison Avenue one day and I see this dog, and he was breathtaking. So I stopped to talk to the owner, and I said, I would love to photograph your dog. So we made a date to meet in Central Park, and I took him to one of my favorite spots, which I thought would be magnificent, which is up on like 98th on the west side, and it's a beautiful pond with fabulous
Right.
weeping willow trees. And I started to set the dog up where I wanted him to sit. I think there's a photograph of it, and I was literally just doing my lighting, getting the lighting ready, not the lighting, the exposure, because it was all daylight, natural light, but I was getting my exposure ready and took a few shots of Joe, and then these 3 ducks waddled past on this pond, started quacking, and before he knew what he was doing, he had jumped in the pond.
Right, and
I
we
mean,
have,
that's what a dog should do, right?
Well, absolutely.
But you could see the minute he got in the water, he was like, what have I done? And he ran out of the water and he shook himself off.
well, we have such a marvelous photograph
Yeah.
that you took of him doing that. And actually the pair, the 2 photos,
Yes.
the before and after. But then you also feel that the dog jumping into the water and you're taking that portrait really also says something about the dog as well.
Yes, absolutely.
It's as valid a portrait as when he's perfectly groomed.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, an Afghan is a fabulous dog, and whether or not it's beautifully manicured or soaking wet, it still is lovable and still is terrific. And as I said to his owner, I said, well, we'll have to reschedule the session, but I'm going to get a great blog out of this, which I did.
Which you did, yes. And you also photograph your own animals. You
I
have,
do,
You
I
have
do.
how many?
Well, I had 4.
You have 4.
Unfortunately, since we agreed to do the show, now we only have 2.
Oh,
But that
sorry to hear
happens
that.
when you have pets for a long time. They live for a very long time. So now we have 1 cat and 1 dog, and I have photos of each. The first is my cat Sabrina, who is a wonderful poser. She loves to have her picture taken, which is very, very, very unusual for
a cat. Yes.
And then the other is my golden doodle Alfie, and
Is that with a grandchild?
Yes, and that's with my granddaughter. Okay. And it's one of my all-time favorite photographs because it's my 2 favorite.
And they're both about the same size,
Yeah,
you know.
and my 2 favorite sentient beings. So
there you go.
So I love that picture.
Well, talking about dogs and children, do you think that being a woman gives you a particular edge in photographing animals? Is it like photographing children, easier, harder?
I think being a woman is very, very helpful because in my experience, and I speak from my own opinion, it's not any, in my own opinion, I feel like animal photography takes an enormous amount of patience. An enormous amount of patience. And I find the women in my world tend to have more patience than the men in my world. And that may not be true for a lot of male photographers, but I think it's, for me, I have one story where I literally had to go and visit. This was a beautiful long-haired Chihuahua. We have a photograph of her.
Who's that, Mary?
Her name is Mary.
Okay.
And the owners told me before, they called me and asked me if I would photograph her, and they said she's very, very, very skittish. She was a rescue, and she obviously had some trauma. And so I said, well, let me just come over, no camera, no nothing. And I went over the first day, and for half an hour I sat there, and the dog did nothing but bark at me. Nothing. I was on the couch, she was over there, and she was just barking at me. And I just bided my time, and eventually, by the time it was time to leave, she came over to the couch. She wouldn't let me touch her or anything, but she came over to the couch. And then the day before the shoot, I said, let me come back. And I came back with my camera, no lighting, but just my camera, and I sat on the floor, just fiddling around with my camera. And before you knew it, she was sitting right next to me. She was letting me pet her. And so the next day when I came back, we had a great time together.
I understand that sometimes you need to speak the same language.
Oh, yes.
With your,
yeah, I was telling you, we were talking about
subjects.
that before, that when you photograph dogs, this is a really important tip for anybody who is into taking photos of their animals. They tend to look better when their ears are up.
Okay.
And the way that I get
it's
them
like husky,
to do, like husky or
Husky
Mary, and
or
the way that
Mary?
I do that is literally I get their attention by barking. Like I'm behind the camera and I go, and their ears go up and they look straight at me, and
we
I
hope
get a
that
great shot.
Your bark is not as bad as your bite. Right?
Yes, no, it definitely is not. I mean, you can see it's a very sweet bark. I don't growl or anything.
It is.
And then I also bring squeaky toys with me, because sometimes the bark can wear off. Like if I do it too often, then they'll get used to it. So then I have squeaky toys. And what I tend to do with that is I have the owner, because dogs are fixated on their owners. So if an owner is in the room, which sometimes I need, I'll have them, like if I'm down on the floor, which is where you get the best photographs of dogs, especially small dogs, is being on their level. And so the owner will crouch down behind me and, hit the squeaky toy, and that gets their attention right away and gets their ears up.
So is that true of Bulldog also?
Oh, well
that's
Harlem was the name of the Bulldog. And one of the great lessons I learned from photographing Harlem was that you should always ask before you take a job whether the dog has been trained to sit or stay. Because, as you might imagine, it's really difficult to take photos of a dog who won't sit or stay. And Harlem was one of those dogs, so I had this photo session set up. It was a studio shot. It would never have worked outdoors because he would have ran away. But it was in a studio, and I spent the entire hour and a half, 2 hours photographing him, just following him, just trying to get a shot. And I must have taken close to 200 photographs of his behind and his side and a corner of his ear. And I think I got 2 or 3 what you would even call decent photographs of him. And this was one of them. And he really, and I finally said to his owner, look, you're going to have to sit on the floor with the dog and get him to stay. And then just when I'm ready, you're going to have to leave. You know, you're going to have to like move away, because that was the only way we could get the dog to stay still. That was how this worked. How it was. And so I'm there on the floor with my camera, and Harlem is there, and the owner starts to move away, and Harlem comes charging at me just to be friendly. I mean,
and I hope you were snapping away.
No. I mean, it happened like that because we were only 10 feet away. Knocked me over. 45 pounds of solid muscle is this bulldog. Knocks me over, knocks my camera over, which fortunately was unharmed, and just to lick my face. And it was like, oh, I'm never going to get a photograph of this dog. But then we did. But then we did. And they were very happy. And I blew it up into about an 11 by 14 that's in the owner's office. And they were very, very happy with it.
Well, that's good. And the next one that I'd like to talk about is Foxhound with her puppies.
Well,
it's a Foxhound. What was her name?
Well, I never knew her name, but
Okay.
I was
We can call her Foxhound.
I was lucky enough to be down in I was visiting Monticello, the Jefferson home in Virginia, and one morning on our way out of the hotel, we were at a stop sign, and I looked down the road. My husband and I were on our way to Monticello, and I looked down the road, and there are at least 50 foxhounds being walked down this gorgeous country lane by 3 people. And so we stopped, and it turned out that there was a foxhound club, and these were the foxhounds that were used in the racing, in the fox hunts. And so we asked them if I could come back in the afternoon and photograph, and I did. I spent about 3 hours with them, photographing all of the foxhounds in their kennel and outside, and the puppies. But when I came across this mama with her brand new babies, this was the highlight of the day, was photographing her.
This was not actually a commission. This was
pure luck.
And
but this was one of these photographs that has been sold in a private collection.
private collections.
So
did you use natural daylight
Yes.
for this? Okay, because a lot of your photographs look like you use a lot of natural light, but you use strobes
I
also.
prefer to use natural light, although in indoor studio
you have to
use it, and especially with dark colored dogs, you really need to highlight their fur. Otherwise, they just tend to look like kind of just a black blob or a dark brown blob.
Before we get to your book and some of the more exotic animals, I just want to talk about your picture of the dog with his owner.
Oh, yes.
Because it's a beautiful shot.
Thank
it kind of illustrates the point that sometimes owners come to resemble their pets, or vice versa.
Yes, I can see that.
And it's certainly, you've managed to capture the love between the two of them and the devotion. So tell us a little bit about that.
This mama and baby is, they're in Sedona, Arizona, where I also have a home. And This woman is she's really a dog whisperer and a wolf. She rescues dogs who are part wolf, which are very difficult to find homes for. And she has a lot of land and has fenced in, lots and lots of space for these rescue dogs. This dog in particular, whose name is Geronimo, probably weighs 180 pounds. I mean, he's one of the hugest dogs I've ever seen. But gentle as a lamb, as you can see in this picture. And whenever I go to Sedona, I try to photograph this woman who's a dear friend at this point, and her wolves, because people have such a weird opinion of wolf dogs that I want to show the world how sweet and wonderful they are. So
before we run out of time, I just want to, and I want everyone to see your book.
Yes, thank you.
Called Animal Wisdom.
Yes, well, this was also a labor of love. This was something that I'd been thinking about doing for a long time, which was, I always gather quotations about dogs and cats and animals. And so that is basically what this book is just, my photographs on one side and what I think are terrific quotations. For example, this one says, "An animal's eyes have the power to speak a great language." Martin Buber said that. And
this book is available from Blurb.
This is on Blurb. It's self-published.
Blurb.com.
This is one of my favorites. This was our cat, Natasha. Yes. And this one says, "Thousands of years ago, cats were worshipped as gods. Cats have never forgotten this."
I don't think people have either.
And if you own a cat, you know how true that is.
Yes.
They say cats don't, they don't have owners.
Dogs come when they're called. Cats take a message and get back to you.
Exactly.
And it looks like we're just about running out of time.
Well.
So I would like to thank our guest, Terry Berenson, our sponsor, Professional Women Photographers, Manhattan Neighborhood Network, and of course, all of you for joining us on this edition of PhotoTalk. See you next time.